ready to go.
Thank you. A very warm welcome to all our new as well as returning participants from across time zones. This is yet another monthly installment of the Gender Justice India 5 Elements SDG webinar series that happens on the 8th of every month at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. I, Shivanshi, along with my co-host Sonam, sincerely hope that in the backdrop of everything that's going on in the world, and especially in India, that you and your loved ones are safe. If this is the first time that you're joining us, welcome. A little bit about our organization. The 5 Elements Sustainable Development Group is a consultancy and a collaborative network of institutional and individual partners committed to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Under the able mentorship of our chairman, Mr. Arun Amritam, we are on a mission to foster collaboration and consummate synergies to achieve impact at the nexus of smart cities and smart villages, renewable energies, essential technologies for development, impact finance, and consulting. Through the Gender Justice India webinar series, we aim to bring on thought leaders, academics, and activists from around the globe to engage, learn, and deliberate upon the why, the what, and the how of the way forward on issues of gender, deprivation, and inequality. Before I introduce our esteemed guest for the evening, let me humbly reiterate a few house rules. Respected participants are requested to keep their microphones muted and are encouraged to type in their comments and questions in the chat box. As I mentioned earlier, my colleague and co-host Sonam will be taking them up during the Q&A session. For your information, this talk along with our other webinars are recorded for our YouTube channel. For today's webinar, we are very kindly joined by Ms. Brinda Adige, who's a well-known women's rights activist, anti-abuse and anti-human trafficking activist, a development consultant, author, and the founder director of Global Concerns India, Bangalore. An alumni of Bangalore University, she's a committed professional with a demonstrated history of working in many civic and social organizations. She's also an extremely competent business development professional, skilled in management of non-profit organizations, policy analysis, and strategic planning, program evaluation, and research. In addition to her present responsibilities, she's previously been associated with a number of state and local level organizations, including the Mahila Samakhya in Karnataka, the Hunger Project in Karnataka, and as the founder coordinator of the Makkala Sahai Vahini. It's a privilege to host you, ma'am. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. This is a very, very privileged session that I have been invited to share my work and my experiences. This is a moment that across the world, and more so in India, and especially just now in Bangalore and Karnataka, so much of grief, anguish, trauma, confusions, many people living in denial, overnight losing their families, parents, people getting orphaned. And amidst all of this, we have violence within our homes. And somewhere along the line, experts seem to call this violence by our loved ones, by people we trust, by people who we thought are ours, are going to look after us for the rest of our lives. And experts call it the shadow pandemic. One really doesn't know why this phrase came for something so much that is part of our lives. Why is it called a shadow pandemic? Is it that once this particular COVID pandemic goes away, this shadow will go away? No, it won't. It's always been there. But what reiterates this today? Violence within my home, by family members, by people I know, domestic violence. I call it the silent pandemic because this abuse, this trauma is there and was there, and I'm sure it's continuing to be there. So it's no longer a shadow. It must not be anymore in the shadow. It must also no longer be in silence and no longer continue to be in denial. The last 1 year since March 2020 and till date now, what we have seen is literally forced to stay indoors. Many times when you look at statistics that are presented because of surveys and researches that people have made, they will tell you that there's one woman, every third woman faces domestic violence, faces violence, torture from partners, husbands, spouses, from people who are in her own home. Now, what we saw was, and what we see also today, the state that has failed women and children, state that has failed families. Domestic violence is a part of the gender-based violence. Domestic violence is also in most South Asian countries and more so in India, an issue that we are always taught as girls and women. You must not speak about it. You must not tell about this to anybody else, because coming out and talking about it means you are jeopardizing your family's prestige, your family's respect, and you are a bad woman. How is it that you can't put up with all of this? Every woman puts up with this. Your mother, your grandmother, your aunts, your relatives, every woman puts up with it. Why can't you put up? Why would you want to make noise? The other part of it, you already 10, 15 years down the line in your marriage. What's the point in now coming out and complaining? What's the point in now saying that you do not want to be in a violent situation? You don't want to be inside this home that is so filled with violence. And everybody knows that the pandemic actually opened up a Pandora's box where women who have been facing it, who have been putting up with it. In our language over here, we use this word called adjust. Why wouldn't you adjust? Why don't you just adjust? It's just for some time. And he's actually a very nice person. He does this only when it's like that. He does this only when something like this happens. Otherwise, he's a nice person. For all the outsiders, he's a nice person. So this adjustment actually stretched and went to breaking point. And what happened is women had no access to anything. Of course, their usual friends, their relatives, that they could go and sit in somebody's house, go and talk to somebody for 2 hours, 3 hours, be away from it when they go into their offices, wherever they are working. All of that shut down. What did the government do? What is my law saying? We have this law called the Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence, enacted in 2005, that very, very clearly talks of this act being a remedial act. It's not a criminal act. It's not a criminal law. It's a remedial law. And we'll discuss about what is wrong, what is not right when it is just a remedial law. But it's very clear, commissions and omissions by the husband or members of that family on this woman, physical, sexual, emotional, verbal, economic, is not acceptable and is a crime. But when you take this matter to the law enforcers, they do not look at it as a crime. Even today, 2021, you go to any police station, you call up the helplines and tell them that you're being beaten by your husband, they still call it a private matter. They don't accept that this is no longer private. So were they not trained and educated well? Is it because the law has not really clearly spoken about it being a crime? Why is it that the first response that you get when you reach out to anybody is, oh, your husband hit you. Only your husband hit you. Or your spouse, your partner, you live with him, you live with her. So it's not even important that I will listen to this person who wants to tell me something. asking for some kind of a support, reaching out. And this is an attitudinal problem. It is an educational problem. It is many times told as a cultural problem, but we will never talk of it as a systemic problem. We do not want to address it from there. We always say that they will take it up, but they may not have been trained well. Who has not been trained well? Nobody knows, because it's such a nebulous thing, they, that we don't really know who has not been trained well. So, if people are victims of domestic violence, in whichever way, whichever form, who do they go to? Last year, we had the National Women's Commission saying that we got this many emails and this many phone calls, and now we are still responding. And somebody has done a survey, and I'm not sure, because some of the tweets that we saw, complaints that were made last year, are still being responded to today. And then we do not know the number of women who might have died, still waiting for someone to give them that aid and that help. And it is so nice when we hear that it is just a shadow pandemic. It's not shadow. It is a silent pandemic, because this is part of this large pandemic. And after COVID goes, or COVID reduces, or COVID minimizes, this violence within our homes will continue in the same intensity, in the same manner, probably even more different, in a manner that we are still not able to come out and speak about it. Nobody can say that it happens only in slums, it happens only in villages, only in so and so homes, and not in those homes. It happens everywhere, in every house. What has my government done about it? Who have we trained? How long does it take for someone to respond to you when you make a complaint? We live in an age of sophisticated technology. So you have all of these advertisements that tell you, download this app. When you're in trouble, you can call us. Now, I must have an Android or an iPhone to download that app. How many of us women have that kind of an technology that can be available on my phone? As usual, we see that women will be the last to get this so-called advanced phone. As always, they eat last, they sleep last, they work more, they suffer more. And the phone that they also get will be this very functional phone. I can make a call, receive a call, and save some numbers. But my government would say, I'm not complaining about my government, but I want us to understand that this cannot be just left to lurk in the shadows. This silence must be heard. It's so loud. Why is it that we are not hearing it? Why are we not listening to this silence? And once we do that, we expect systems and mechanisms to be put in place. We have the National Commission, we have state commissions, we have helplines, but we are not reaching out to people in need. The other part of this problem, shelters. There is no refuge. Where will these women go? You need an emergency shelter. I'm asked for a COVID negative certificate at 11:30, 1:30 early morning. Where would this person go for such a certificate? So these are questions I want you to keep thinking about and asking. When I say I have a helpline, who is handling that helpline? What is it that they are able to offer to this person who calls that helpline? If I have just 30 seconds before my spouse, my partner, my husband comes back into that room to harm me or whatever, how can I be listening to press 1 if you want Kannada, press 2 if you want Hindi, press 3 if you want English. You want to make a complaint, press 5. 30 seconds are over. There's no more time left for her to reach out for help. Next morning, she may not need that help that she wanted last night, because we never record any of these deaths as unnatural deaths because of domestic violence. Police record it just as unnatural death. There's not much investigation that goes into it. Tell me anywhere in India that police have investigated these kind of deaths. Because if you look at the other statistics of the number of complaints that come to police stations, it's over 200 in any given month in Bangalore city. How many of them might have died? We don't know. We don't have those statistics. And as long as we leave this issue in the shadow, nobody is going to make any statistics out of it. We don't want those numbers, because those numbers, again, will be said, the NGOs, the civil society wanted it. It's not so bad, but they make it look so bad. Really? Those are questions we want to ask ourselves. We've had the courts coming out now and questioning. But my question now would be, how feasible and accessible have we made the courts? Because under the Domestic Violence Act, a woman can go to the family court and make a complaint. She doesn't need a lawyer. But I don't know how many women in India have actually gone to court on their own and made a complaint before the magistrate. Many of us do not know about it. So we will go with a lawyer. Lawyer fees are high. To make that complaint and see that I get justice and it is brought before the magistrate, what am I willing to do? The last 1 year that we are seeing, no jobs, no money coming in, no salaries, no wages coming in to a large number of people. Maybe 35, 40% have jobs that they can do from their homes, but the larger population doesn't really have that luxury. There may be jobs, there may not be jobs, there may be jobs just for a few hours. And if you look at the unorganized sector, you will find that they have no jobs at all. But if I have to go to court, I have to pay money. Where will I get this money from? It's not a one-time money. I have to engage a lawyer and see the case through to a logical conclusion. How many cases actually reach that logical conclusion? Is it really the justice that I want? What happens in between? How many of us who might have actually had the courage and probably the strength also to see through that case in court have come to almost the last part of it and have been advised and counseled to compromise for the sake of your own finances, for the sake of your children, for the sake of your job? You've taken too many holidays the last 4 years. You've finished all your leave. This, my friends, is what we need to address. This silence must be so loud that my government does not just give government orders, directives, and say the helplines must start functioning. Everything should function in convergence. There has to be intra-departmental coordination. Only then, when this woman calls a helpline or seeks support from any one of these mechanisms that may be available, can she have the confidence to say, yes, some help, some support will come to me? How often we have women who come and give us complaints saying, my husband kidnapped my children and is now blackmailing me. If I take the case back, I'll get my children. Can we not file a case of blackmail? No, my law doesn't allow that. My husband took away my child, and that's not called kidnap. forcibly took away the child. It's not called kidnap. It's not called anything. It's just that the husband took the children and went. Now that he's blackmailing me, why don't you sit down, have a chat with him and compromise? There's no crime there. I don't look at it as crime. How can my husband just kidnap my child? He loves the child as much as I do. So there is no kidnap and there is no blackmail. And these are not cases that get registered anywhere. We talk about our courts. We are talking about courts being shut now because of the pandemic, but we haven't found an alternative. The courts say that virtual hearings are happening. How many women can go on for those virtual hearings? Where do they have the access for that? Why can you not have mobile courts? Why is it not possible for you to decentralize everything? Because we can't be reaching out all the time to the government. The government, the system needs to reach out to me, the citizen. That is why I elect a government. I pay my taxes. So the government should reach out to me. And that's its duty. And if we continue to keep making life so miserable for women who are on a daily basis suffering in their homes, culture doesn't permit me. My conditioning doesn't permit me to come out and talk about it, or take a step that is different from the usual things that are there. Then my system doesn't allow me to ask for that support. And if I do, then I don't get that support. At some point, if I go to the courts, I don't get that support. What are we saying? Leave it in the shadows? Don't talk about it? Don't make so much noise? Just because there's a law, don't think that you have to get it activated and executed on a daily basis. What is it that we want to tell our women when we want to give them this confidence? And that is what we want the government to work on. This is not a shadow pandemic. This is part of this big pandemic that people do not want to listen to, especially my government. So we want to break the silence. We want this silence to be heard and listened to by my government. We want my government to understand the socio-economic iniquities that are there, which does not allow this woman to access anything. The law, the Domestic Violence Act says that if you get beaten by your husband and you want to register a complaint and you go register a complaint, you take it to court, your husband will be made to pay at least 1 lakh compensation for whatever medical issues that you might have. I don't think anywhere in India there's a case that has been registered. The law also says, depending on your case, the severity of your case, the seriousness of your case, a judge can give you an interim order within 48 hours. Could be protection order, could be the order for you to stay inside your home and not have your husband come inside. How many of us have got this order in 48 hours? That's the law. This is what we need to ask our government. I think I have spoken more than my time. Yes, I will now just ask you to ask me questions, give your comments, share your own learnings. Maybe I could then add to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Adige, for sharing your very eye-opening perspective on just how disturbing and disastrous and sometimes irreversibly traumatizing the current situation is being on this front. The structure versus individual debate that you referred to when it comes to domestic abuse and the existential crisis that women face as a means to an end, a reproductive end or a productive end, and not living, breathing people deserving of equality in power and in materials is why we must continue to keep speaking till the powers that be hear us. We shall now embark upon the Q&A session moderated by my colleague Sonam. Sonam, take it away.
Thank you so much, Shivanshi. And thank you so much for Ms. Adige for bringing all this information and all this light to this topic. Thank you so much. We have some questions and comments from the audience. The first one is about what you said, that the government doesn't allow women to uh, really go into the law and register cases. Well, I have a question or a discussion, a comment regarding that, that as you said, the pandemic is really loud, but I think, is it really, really that loud? I mean, not the pandemic, but the voice of women. You know, I have uh, seen cases where women try to hide their own pain. They try to hide their own sufferings, and in fact, kind of teach other women to adjust or just try to, ignore what they have experienced. So can we not also blame women, and not just men, not just society, and not just the government, for suffering, for the sufferings of other women? Is it not the entire society? Is it not only the men but also the women who are making this happen to other women?
Yes, patriarchy seeps into every level, at every phase in our lives. And I'm not saying that it's just the men, but it's also women, because they seem to be greater proponents of patriarchy. But let's ask this question: should I blame the women? Should I blame the men? Should I blame this woman who has been conditioned from the time like she's 2 years old on how the society expects her to behave?
Right. And I'm sorry, continue. Please continue.
Yeah, and in given this scenario, what has my educational institutions done? They have reiterated all of this. Okay, what has my media done? It reiterates it again and again. Look at all the advertisements, look at all the serials. Every time you reiterate, a good woman is A, B, C, D. So you dictate to me who a good woman is on a daily basis. Where is this education and confidence that I'm giving to women to say, talk about violence? Where have I told the boys that it's not okay to beat? It's not okay. You can't be macho, you are not macho. We never ask these difficult questions, you see. We don't want to. We will not make these comments. And that is why today we have many feminist organizations, including ours, working with boys and men. They have to be equal partners in this struggle to bring about that equality, but more to reduce this violence. Violence is not just beating, violence is also so many other ways: mental, psychological, emotional. All of this is violence. And we need to teach both that this is not okay. So, yes, why
Yes.
am I asking the government? Because the government has a bigger say in all of this. From telling you and me what kind of advertisements are acceptable and what kind of lessons must be there in my school textbooks.
You're absolutely right. Government has a great say in this. What we see on TV is, well, there are a number of things on TV. And when I am 2 year old, well, the first lesson I got is from, well, the first lesson any girl gets is from from her family, from her mother and from her father. So I think even our own mothers, our grandmothers also play a very strong role on what we need to watch, how we need to learn, how we need to judge what should we watch in the future, like what ad should be watching, what series should we be watching, what kind of people we should be following. I believe that government and the series that we watch also has men and women both in their proportions. I think there is a strong role of women as well. And as you say, definitely government has definitely a big role to play in that. Thank you so much. Uh, we also have questions from Arun. Arun, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Thank you, Sonam. Thanks, Brinda, for being with us today, for bringing us your passion and your understanding and awareness of the situation. You were saying a lot about the government, the government, the government. And I was reminded of a quote. I come from the industry, not from the social sector, but I'm now new in the social sector. I'm a proponent of the quality movement, where Edward Deming was the father of the modern quality movement. And this is what Edward Deming says about the industry and about industrial processes. When the majority of the people behave in a certain way, the majority of the time, the problem is not the people, the problem is the system. And this is what you said as well. It's a systemic issue. And when it becomes a systemic issue, he says it's a leadership responsibility. The issue lies with the leaders in the industry, the leaders in the factory, or leaders everywhere. So if I should transpose that thought here to society and what we are going through, it's a leadership issue. And you're absolutely right. While I've heard that it needs to start in schools, it needs to start in homes, it's a matter of propaganda, the way India has done all the propaganda for family planning and Nirodh and all that, that's important. It boils down to the leaders. Now, but then the leaders are, at the end of the day, a reflection of who we are. We elected them. They come from us. So there is also a kind of catch-22 here. The leaders, unfortunately, don't drop from heaven. They don't drop from any, paradise. They're not there from paradise. So how do you resolve this issue that, yes, it is a leadership issue. It's the government that needs to play a role. But the government, at the end of the day, is a reflection of who we are. How do we get out of this catch-22?
I think what we should be talking over here and telling is, does the government listen to its people? And if it is, and if it must, and as it should, it's not something that I'm speaking here today is new. Because as soon as the pandemic came in, and there were so many cases, and people were trying to see how to respond to this case, these cases, many letters went to the government. We did not criticize and point fingers at the government. As civil society organizations, as development consultants, as people who want to work alongside and continue to work alongside with the government, there were recommendations that were given based on best practices. What is working? What could work? Stuff that is already working. Because the government has all the resources, the mandate to scale up. The next question. So why did it not happen? I'm asking the same question today, just now. Why did it not happen? The civil society came all out with documentation, giving the recommendations to say, treat this violence, gender-based violence and domestic violence, as part of critical services that must be reached out to people. You still haven't done it. Because somewhere when you say that, this is how my people think, this is how society is, they are educated like that, but they must have somewhere to be able to access that kind of service. There is no accessibility. If there is no accessibility, or I'm not saying 100% are going to access all of it tomorrow. In 1997, when I pioneered the Makkala Sahayavani with the Bangalore City Police, we also had discussions with other departments. You will not believe it. 1997, we have a couple of the people who make decisions tell a phone helpline will never work in India. It would take another 15, 20 years. This is 1997. And I said, okay, it doesn't matter, let's try it out. And today, you have Makla Sahayawani, which has now become like child line all over India, and we have helplines all over the world. We have helplines for so many things today. That apart, again, my question would be, the government must listen to people from the fields and look at it and say, okay, they have given us a roadmap. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. Something is working well over here, something is not working well there. But they've put all of these things together to say this could work as an immediate strategy. A, treat this as critical services that needs to reach people. Now, you've not looked at it. What is the funding allocated? You look at the funding, it's much less than all the other years since independence. Protection officers, as per the law, this is not even a dream fantasy that we are talking about. Protection officers, as per law. How many protection officers per city? Less than 4. The police stations itself are 100 in Bangalore. Where will these protection officers actually go? Are they full-time protection officers? No, they hold additional charges as some other officers, as ICDS officers, and then they are protection officers. So when we made a letter, I made a recommendation, in fact, to the Department of Women and Child to say, call for NGOs, make them protection officers in 3 to 4 police stations so that a NGO can reach out to 5 police stations. Nothing happens. But this is not rocket science. This is just making available systems in all their formats, not so great, but in all their formats, accessible. You need to build that confidence in women that when you call, you will be heard, you will not be judged, you will be given suggestions, and you will not be advised. You will be helped to weigh the pros and cons and for you to make the choice. Is that what I'm doing today? Is it so difficult? It's not so difficult. But the mindset continues to be that, don't bog us down. We are already, too bogged down with running for hospital beds and getting oxygen and seeing that people are not dying. So, this can wait. Even today, when you go to a police station, it's still the same. 2 weeks ago, I was at a police station for over 7 hours, 8 hours before an FIR was lodged. No police station lodges an FIR if you go there and say domestic violence. You try it. If they do it at first instance, we want to use that as an example for the rest of India.
Thank you so much, Ms. Adige. I believe that, well, as I see, not just our legal system, our science is in fact very biased towards women. There are a number of examples, but we will not be discussing those here. So the next question is from Kushbu. Ms. Kushbu, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question yourself?
Yeah, hello. Good evening, Brinda ma'am, and it's very nice to have you here, to have you between us and having your opinion between us. So what my question is that you're talking about the government, we are talking about everything, but what I feel here is that it's more about the fault is in religious side. It's more about the fault on the custom sides that we are facing, because uh, when we talk about the marital rapes and all that thing, the Supreme Court of India has also passed a statement that it cannot be come under as a criminalization law. It cannot be passed under constitutional thing. So I think the loopholes are as what I see is under religious consignment rather than government consignment. Do you also feel the same, or how do you take it as a question?
See, patriarchy stems strongly because of cultural practices, traditions, religion. Yes, it's number one. But can my government sit on an excuse like that? This is there. I'm not saying no. Like we talked about, gender patriarchy, gender discrimination, gender-based violence, all of this stems because of my religion and my culture, my tradition saying, be a good woman. A good woman is so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. All of us want to be good women. All of us want to go to heaven. I've decided I don't want to go to heaven. But that apart, there are still instances when I want help and I reach out to somebody else outside. That somebody else, my first support is my family, my friends, my relatives, somebody who can counsel, patch up, do some kind of a panchayat, arbitrate, all of those things. When these things don't work, then I reach out to the police. I reach out to the government. Now that's the case in 95% of women who are victims of domestic violence. That time is what I'm talking about. All of us will try all the other soft methods. None of us wants to file complaints. Even today, you have women who may be beaten up on a daily basis, calling up the police not to register a complaint. Can you please call my husband and my partner and counsel him? Tell him not to beat me. Now, you and I know, because we work on the field, that it doesn't work like that. You can't call my husband and tell him, be careful, don't beat, otherwise I'll put you in lockup. It's not going to work. Are we scared of the law? No. Very few of us are scared of the law. There's no fear of law. The impunity is very high. But within all of that, I'm saying my access to seeking support must be strengthened. My confidence in me wanting to access that support must increase. And I must be able to trust this support system, that system that is out there, that mechanism that claims that a citizen of this country is entitled to, when harmed, when violated. That is what I'm asking about. We can't change all of this immediately. Traditions and culture and all that, sometimes it looks nice and colorful. We can't change it overnight. You need education, and anyway, your researchers again tell us that it will take another 250 years for equality, gender equality. That's too long a time. I can't even imagine. What I want to is this access to protection, to immediate shelter, to medical aid, to legal aid, to justice. Is that so much? Is that asking too much from my government? From my government that's already reached Moon and Mars? Is it so difficult?
It's not difficult, but it's that way. It's a loophole that government is using, and since the government is using it, government is finding. Government is not. It's always the same in India that laws are there, but nobody enforce it. Nobody is actually getting it to the to empower those laws, and of course it's a fault of government. But
we are asking for
what
government.
I feel is that if government, yes ma'am, yes, sure,
Fill up all the vacancies. You fill up the vacancies. Call for civil society to sit in your police stations if you're not able to respond in the same intensity, passion, and with the same knowledge and experience. Get civil society to sit at your police stations. How can that be so difficult? Get
education system,
people
ma'am.
in all of those vacant positions, whether it is prosecutors, whether it is judges, counselors, policemen and women, and start continuously training them. Patriarchy is not going to go away today, tomorrow, but keep training them, continuously keep training. But have all of this in place. It can't be that the NGO sector, the civil society is doing all of this. You call anybody and the response that you get. And this is not a battle against the government. We are saying the government must work alongside with civil society, and we civil society must share all the knowledge that we have and work alongside with the government so that this pandemic breaks out of that silence, because that one woman's life is very precious. I
I
can't
think what
quote religion and have that life snuffed, or
Yes, of
tradition,
course.
or customs.
Definitely, ma'am.
I think what Khushbu also wanted to say, that culturally women have been trained to be, this perfect motherly figure, perfect wife, and perfect sisters, perfect daughters. And in that kind of system, we have been kind of trained to be just silent and do our duties and just take up our responsibilities as we go about it. And well, now there are a lot of cases when the society makes use of or misuse of that. And you know when you talked about husbands kidnapping the kids, well, the kids are of the husband also, right? But the mother, there's a conception that the mother has to love the kids more, so this is made misuse of. And you are being, as the lady is being said, that your something is being kidnapped by somebody else, although that something, that is the kids, is being kidnapped by somebody who's also their father, who's also responsible their own kids. So when that is a situation, when I make myself more vulnerable, when my kids are being kidnapped, although it's his kids as well, that makes me more vulnerable to be attacked by the society or even the husband or by somebody else, when this should be an attack to the entire family and not just on my kids or on me. That makes a case against the woman when women allow the society to attack the woman, or the culture allows the society to attack the woman, saying that your kids have been kidnapped and you are the one who was to protect them, and you are the one who was to love them. So this is, I think, what uh, kind of Ms. Khushbu was also trying to say, that how culture has trained us to become what we have become, and this has to
Yeah,
be well
because you
slowly.
people,
I'm not saying that it's
you
only
people,
the
of
husbands
course.
who kidnap the children and go. We have lots of cases where women have taken away the children forcibly and not allow the man to have access to the child, even though the child wants to live with the father. So we see this kind of a aggressive, patriarchal attitude and behavior by both. But the critical mass is the number of men doing something like this is higher. It's not that women don't do these things. Women also do it.
Of
They are
course,
also advised
Definitely.
by
yes, yes.
others and so forth to say that you get a case settled faster if you do something like that. That isn't so much the point. And what we want to ask is, where can I get? These are issues that cannot go on for years together in courts. Can we speed the process up? Is there a possibility? Yes, there is a possibility. So, why would you treat a complaint of this nature in the family court for years together? Why would you not put it down? You have fast track courts. Look at how the fast track courts work. Are they really fast? Do they stick to the time limit? When a law is made, there is a certain logic and a certain ideology behind that, of certain philosophy, that this is very important. So when we talk of fast track courts, when we talk of time limitation, it is because of all of these things. The family gets to know one way or the other, it comes to some kind of a logical conclusion, and we put an end to that painful, traumatic phase situation, whatever it might be. But that's not what is happening. The system swallows all of these women and children once again to trouble them. Do you know the number of cases that are languishing in family courts for years together? Years together. And then by the time you receive this case that comes before the magistrate, and they will say that, oh, when the child, in another year, the child will be 18, and then the child can decide whether the child wants to stay with the mother or father. 10 years. A case went on where the mother is asking for custody or the father is asking for custody of the child because the child wants to live with the mother, the child wants to live with the father. And this never happened. Can you imagine the trauma the child has gone through and the trauma that the child is going to carry through for the rest of his or her life? All because of my system. And I dare not, as the government, say, sorry, we had very few judges. Sorry, we don't have too many magistrates. Sorry, we didn't build too many courtrooms. That is what I'm questioning.
Sure. Right. Thank you so much. And very related to this discussion, Ms. Shreya has a question on the chat box. Ms. Shreya says, thank you for this painfully important discussion. I think you put it perfectly when you said it is a systemic problem. And though we can spend hours trying to find the root of this problem, I wanted to ask, where do you think we need to start to make an effective difference? How do we hold those who are responsible, those who commit this crime, and those who let it go unseen, accountable? And how do we get these people to listen? Ms. Brinda.
Great question. I think we must start with ourselves first. If a woman or a man comes and shares about violence within his or her home from people he or she loves, please listen. Please listen to this person. Do not make any judgments. Don't gossip about this person's case if the person wants you to keep that information, that sharing confidential. Continue to encourage this person to say, you need to come out of this abusive situation. You want to come out. People will continue to say, but for the sake of your child, for the sake of society, for the sake of your job, because some of them said that, if I leave my husband, if I leave my partner, my job will go away. I don't know what the connection is, but give them that encouragement, because it begins with us. We watch all the time saying, oh, we gossip, one woman gossiped about the other woman. We talked about her story there. As people who are concerned about what somebody is going through in their homes, however abusive it might be, small or big, it's not for us to judge. Oh, it's only once in a while he beats you up, it's okay. It's never okay. How can it be ever okay? Being beaten by your loved one, being beaten by somebody you trust. So listen to that person, be that person's friend, confidant. If at any point of time that person is asking for help and support, if you're not able to give that help and support, see how the person can reach out to somebody else. With everything that we talked about, the government, about the system, about the mechanism, there are still so many people doing such great, fantastic work out there. So have all of the information of people doing this work, who are reaching out to people, who can be reached out to. Get the phone numbers, get the helpline numbers, get their details. Some people help only with counseling, some people help with spot interventions, some people will give you shelter. Have all of this information and share it with this person. Sometimes the person may find it difficult to go to the shelter or go to that counseling by herself or himself. If you have the time, please accompany that person. Because these are all things that we can do in our very small ways. We may not be able to change the situation and scenario entirely, but this is something that we could do. And remember, anything to do with the law, with the courts, with the police is a long process. Be with that person. Because many times, all of them are very, very strong people. It's just that they want somebody to hold their hand and tell them it's okay, it's right, we'll get through with it. Be kind. All of us are fighting so many different battles. Nobody's battle is small. Nobody's battle is so big that there cannot be a victory. This is the first thing that you must do. It's my responsibility as much as it is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Brinda. It was really helpful. Now, we have very less time. We'll take last comment by Shivanshi. Shivanshi, please go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. And actually, thank you, Sonam, to you as well for actually raising points. I could summarize 3 of them, which is internalized misogyny, which is women being responsible for other women's plight. Of course, self-hatred is very real. It is inculcated in us from birth. Second is the issue of fraternal patriarchy. So we have patriarchy on the streets and inside our homes and public and private. The line is blurred when convenient and not blurred when convenient. Third thing is subliminal messaging. Of course, we have one of the leading production houses run by a woman who's actually producing such, profiting off of misogynistic soap operas, like, so that is another thing, TV soaps. I would not like to say the name. And then leaders are a reflection of who we are. So coming to my question, I wanted to get your comment, Ms. Adige, on the role of who funds political parties. So I've worked on this a little bit. And I think another reason for systematic defunding of the government, like we have less bureaucrats than Singapore at this point. So this is something that we need to look at. And also defunding of local governments, because the state model of funding has been replaced by philanthropic model of development. So things like corporate social responsibility, which is good in the short term, but in the long term, it leads to, a very tunnel vision developmental focus. So what are your thoughts on that? And lack of ideological diversity and defunding of local government, and how that plays into what we're talking about today. Thank you.
Yes, so now we are entering into the political arena. The politics of continuing to keep this as a shadow pandemic. That's a whole different ball game. But one part of the issue that I wanted to discuss with you, when you spoke about CSR, philanthropic funding, how many CSRs in India fund anything to do with women, women's rights, empowering women? I'm empowering you with skills. You can learn tailoring, digital literacy, empowering you to stand up for yourself.
None.
I will empower young girls, but not women. You see, women, if you want, I will teach you tailoring and all of those other things. How many CSRs are funding safe shelters? How many CSRs will give you money to give to let's say a group of lawyers so that they can do pro bono work for women who need legal aid? And that is where the politics of gender equality, addressing the issue of gender-based violence, domestic violence comes into play. So when you ask the question, who's funding political parties, that's another question. Because depending on who's funding, does my ideology change? Maybe.
It does.
I'm not bothered about that. I am not bothered. I am the citizen who is very, very clear that it is the Constitution that must govern everything that the government does. Because this Constitution we gave to ourselves. And this is the Constitution under which I am told that I will be protected. I'm told that I have an entitlement to seek for support and help and protection. Now, if this Constitution that is guaranteeing me all of this is not being taken care of by my government and the state agencies, we need to question the government and the state agencies and its functionaries.
Yeah.
And there is no CSR available for that. Nobody will give it to you.
So that is what I was meaning to say. I absolutely agree with you, because what happens is that the same people funding CSR are also funding the political parties. So there is sort of a monopolization and tunnel visioning of the agenda. And so some things get funded depends on what looks good on social media, and the rest of the things do not. So like that is what happens when you have a very Thatcherist, Reaganist model of government, which is what we have seen more and more. So in this aspect, we vote for the government, but actually the government is not working. So, I mean, the social contract is skewed towards philanthropic organizations, and the role of the government is actually desperately, like deliberately being diluted. So that was my, exactly.
You're absolutely right. And that is why I am reiterating and saying that it is time that we get government back own tracks to say, this is your job, this is your responsibility. You need to extend whatever the law says, which you made. You made the law, you passed it. And so now you can't tell me that you're not going to fund. You can't tell me there are so many vacancies, that we have no money, that you will not budget for it, and that we'll keep this in the shadows. Sorry, we do not want it in the shadows. This is silent, and this silence you will listen to. Don't blame the women and say, why are you not talking about it? I don't get that opportunity to talk at all levels. How many of us get this opportunity? 5, 10 of us, not all of us. That doesn't mean that the government must not understand what my needs and requirements are. And that is why we are telling, we're not asking the government to think about plans and programs, out of thin air. No, stuff has been presented to you, documented to you, because we're not talking out of through our hats. We're telling you, this is the documentation that's been done, years of work, not work simply on research and surveys, but hand in hand field work. Look at it, and you just have to tweak the system a little bit. You just have to put in people and work in coordination and convergence. That cannot be difficult. If you're not doing it, then you're purposely allowing 50% and more of the population to suffer abuse silently. And you are literally intimidating and threatening them directly or indirectly, saying, don't come and talk about it outside. And don't question me. And that's exactly what we need to question today. We are citizens, and we are asking what we are entitled to, that we have guaranteed ourselves from our Constitution. This is our right.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brinda. It's a very interesting conversation, and we'd like to go as long as possible, but well, we have taken most of your time, and it's about time to conclude. So, with this, we come to an end of this month's Gender Justice webinar. It's a privilege to present the vote of thanks on my behalf and my entire team's behalf at 5 Elements SDG. Thank you so much, Ms. Adige, for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to address us and for throwing light upon this neglected issue regarding the multivariate devastating effects of the pandemic. We are also very grateful to our enthusiastic participants for their curiosity and enthusiasm in making this a unique learning experience. Please come back, same date, same time next month as we explore yet another issue with regards to issues of gender justice. Our social media handles are up on the screen. Shivanshi, could you please? Our social media handles are up on the screen in a minute, and we look forward to your comments and queries. Please write to us at 5elements.sdg@gmail.com. Thank you, stay safe, and until we meet virtually again, goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
Arun,
much.
Sam, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks and
Thank
all the
you.
best. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Ms.
Brinda.
Brinda.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Thanks
much,
to all
Arun.
participants. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.